Hi, this is Dr. Kimberley Linert, author of Visualizing Happiness in Every Area of Your Life and host of this podcast, Incredible Life Creator. And today I have with me Heidi Chance. Hey, Heidi.
Hi.
So happy to have you with us. And I think we're going to be talking about a very important topic that is just so important for families, for everyone to understand and be educated about. So thank you so much for being here.
You're welcome. I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, so I'm going to read your short bio. Heidi Chance is a distinguished law enforcement professional with over 27 years of dedicated service. Throughout her career, she has been at the forefront of combating sex trafficking, bringing her vast experience, real truths, lived experience as an undercover officer, and impactful case study examples into her coaching, training, and presentations. Heidi is renowned for her expertise in the field, recognized as a subject matter expert in sex trafficking, and frequently called upon as an expert witness in trials. She was featured in the Frontline PBS documentary Sex Trafficking in America and is an executive contributor to BRAINZ Magazine, authoring several articles on human trafficking. So, like I said, I think this is a really important topic. So, I'd like to know your story, how you got into this.
Yeah. It was one of those things where I was already working as a police officer for several years, and I ended up going to an assignment at a school to be the officer at the school. And at the school, I was servicing kids, seventh and eighth graders. And every day you park the police car out front of the school. I'm sure people are pretty used to that for a deterrent. And we don't get to take the car home, so I had to return the keys to the police station. And one day when I was going into the precinct to return the keys and go home for the day, I happened to walk by an area where we interview juveniles who are either in trouble or were waiting for their parents to come pick them up. And I saw this girl who I remembered from like the year prior or like 2 years prior. She was still a juvenile on that day because she was in the juvenile holding area. And I saw that she was in trouble, like handcuffed to the wall and, in trouble. And, she recognized me as the officer from her school when she was younger. And I, struck up a conversation with her, asking her why she was in trouble. And that's when she told me she was under arrest for prostitution. And this was a long time ago. We don't arrest victims any longer, but that was, a practice a long time ago. We're talking 2006, 2007-ish. I had been a cop for many years already. I knew prostitution was a crime, but I didn't know it was happening to children. I didn't know young people fell into that lifestyle. And so I kind of had like a shock revelation of, wow, I kind of want to work this crime more in depth because I, have a unique perspective being a school resource officer. I have a, rapport with this age demographic and exploring why they fall into this lifestyle and what I can do to prevent and help them not fall into this lifestyle is what I pretty much made my life mission the whole rest of my career.
Wow. So, when it comes to trafficking, is it mostly that age group that's affected, or does it start earlier? When does that start?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And that's actually one of the main questions I get when I travel around presenting on human trafficking is people, really want to understand what happens to these victims to fall into this situation. And is there a way to tell, or what does a sex trafficking victim look like? I've gotten that question before. And it's one of those where, I talk through when I present about human trafficking, I talk through the case that, took a long time in my career. And in that one case, it had 7 victims. And it was a situation where it almost had a picturesque view of each different vulnerability that a trafficker could exploit in each different person. So, for example, one of the victims, she was in her 40s. She was a Department of Corrections officer working at the prison, but lost her job. So there's her vulnerability. And then she became a stripper at the strip club and met this man who ended up exploiting her and her daughter. she entered the life of prostitution in her 40s. She never had done anything like that before, but in an extreme situation where she lost her job and her livelihood, he was able to exploit. Same case, different victim in that case, barely an adult, 19 years old, no history of any sexual abuse or any trauma or anything like that. Parents are doctor and nurse. She has a full ride scholarship, so not a very smart girl, full ride scholarship to Northern Arizona University. And she meets a guy on Craigslist who wants to take modeling pictures of her. And so she may have been dealing with the self-esteem issue at that time. And unfortunately, that photographer introduced her to the brothel owner, and she became a victim and was exploited in this situation with this same other adult female and the other victims. And so it isn't just the kids that are in the poor part of town or the kids that aren't well off or have had some major traumatic incident happen to them. It could actually be anyone of any age, of any socioeconomic background. And that's what makes it way difficult for people to really recognize this happening to someone they know and, prevent it themselves. So education is really, really important.
So I guess I always thought of sex trafficking as someone who is being kidnapped, even small children being kidnapped and taken somewhere. But the examples you just gave are people who were just weakened in a weakened moment and got taken advantage of.
Yeah, there's definitely myths out there. I would say there's, a small element of abduction or kidnapping that, that traffickers use as a tactic to get a victim under their wing. But most of it comes from the manipulation and, by definition, when we define the crime itself, it is sex trafficking by the means of force, fraud, or coercion. And so force is maybe that abduction or maybe some violent incident, physical force. But the fraud and the coercion are really more often than not how this initially starts. So the fraud is this situation where traffickers are really skilled, just like a skilled predator, groomer, at trying to describe this amazing life that you will live if you come work for me. We're going to get an apartment. I'm going to get you a car. We're going to have all these expensive traveling trips and dinners and jewelry and shopping and all of this amazing stuff. However, none of that really ever happens. And that's, the fraud. And then the coercion is, in simplest terms, that is how traffickers threaten their victims. These threats are very real to victims. I always say that in my experience, a trafficker is the most reliable person you will ever meet. If they say they're going to beat you up, they're going to beat you up because they have to have their victims believe that what they say will happen. Otherwise, these victims wouldn't stick around. So the coercion also involves threats to their family, threats to, expose them online. I've had a victim describe being filmed, and she would try and delete the videos of her and the trafficker in a sexual intercourse or sexual position. And she tried to delete those because he would constantly threaten her that if she didn't do what he wanted her to do, he would send those videos to family and friends or post it online without her consent and all of those things. So that's part of the coercion. So those are, some of the things that are going on here that I don't think people realize.
Wow. So these people who are in this basically servitude against their will, doing things they don't want to be doing, um, they're threatened so much that they're even afraid to even leave, even though it's a horrible situation.
Yeah, because part of that is also the isolation. So a good trafficker will do a really good job of burning your bridges. So you can't, even if you wanted to leave, your family already thinks you're an awful person. So you can't go home. So you might as well just stick around here because you've already burned the bridges of where you would go. And so the isolation with, that, and then keeping these people moving constantly. They're very transient. They're moving from city to city, state to state. One, because they don't want to get caught by the police. So if they stick around too long in a certain area, they're going to get caught by law enforcement. But two, they don't want their victims to get to know a normal person, like the lady at the hotel desk, because that normal person might say, hey, I've watched you a couple of days now, and I want to help you get out of this situation. So they don't want that. So they're very, very transient, moving all over, because they want their victims to be completely dependent on them for their livelihood and their survival.
So do they take them on planes and things? Like, how do they get them on planes with their identity without, I don't know, them having some chance to yell or say something to somebody in transit?
Yeah. So part of this whole, the fraud and that manipulation and that coercion is sometimes these victims think they're in love or in a relationship with their trafficker. Like that manipulation, if you think, people talk about narcissists, they've never met a trafficker. It's a whole nother level. And it is one of those where they feel like they have some kind of bond with this person, even though they may have been physically violent with them. They feel like they owe them something. There's a lot of shame associated with all of this. So it is definitely a situation where they sometimes are, sometimes they'll lie to the police just to protect their trafficker. It's kind of like that domestic violence cycle where why does the wife keep returning to the husband that just beat her up? And so if you equate it to that, that's also the power that these traffickers have on their victims, and they stick around for those reasons also.
Got it. So, you said even a 40-year-old woman was put into this servitude, into this trafficking. So, do they even care how old people are? Is it only women or is it men?
Yeah, great question. No, I would say that a trafficker's job, they don't have a real job, like a normal job, a legitimate income coming in. Their job is to manage the victims they have right now and look for new ones. And, the reason why they look for younger victims is because this is a supply and demand issue. We have the supply, which is the traffickers supplying the victims, but we have the demand, which is men buying sex. Sorry, not sorry. In my experience, it's been men buying sex. I've never had a case involving a woman buy sex. Men buying sex, and they're wanting younger individuals to purchase. So the traffickers are looking for younger individuals to give to the buyers, to the demand. And so, it's really a interesting situation as far as these victims and how they fall into this and how they stay in it.
Wow. And then, do they are they when they're looking for someone, let's say they're on the street in a big city, they're looking for someone. Who are they looking for? Who are they looking for, and how do they know that's the person they can get a hold of compared to someone who they're like, "Oh, that person, there's no way I can get that person."
Yeah, and that's, a really good question because we don't know. Some traffickers work differently. The ones that would be looking for people in person, they're going to try and exploit maybe a person that's homeless because there's a vulnerability there, a person that looks like they are not as far as financially stable or financial means, so that they can seem like they're going to fill that void for that person and lure them into a situation where, they're dangling that carrot of, we're never going to actually have all this stuff that I'm promising you. But if you, and it's an awful movie and it's very degrading to women, but there's a movie called Pimps Up, Hoes Down. And in that movie, you have a trafficker that actually is interviewed by someone, and he talks about finding vulnerable people and seeking them out. And that not, you can't go into Walgreens and just find a random girl and approach her and say, hey, do you want to work for me? It takes a certain type of person that they're looking for. And that type of person is going to be someone with some vulnerability going on right there that they can try and exploit. And it, like I said, for children and, teenagers, that is happening on social media and online. And those, kids that think I'm going to be Instagram famous if I keep my profile open to the public. They're literally sliding into their private messages and, kind of casting this fishing line, copying and pasting the messages that they're sending out to hundreds of profiles all day long to see who will take the bait. And unfortunately, a lot of kids will engage in someone that's showing interest in them, especially if they feel they're not getting that at home with their parents.
Mhm. So what kind of message would they send a child when they're sending that a bunch of them out?
Yeah, so as an undercover, I participated in lots of what we call catfishing pimps type of operations, or even chatting with child predators. And a lot of times it's compliments. You're too sexy to be 13. Some crazy things that they've said to kids. But it is mainly surrounding, trying to boost up their initially their physical appearance, and kind of convey that they're attracted to them in some way, like a relationship, like boyfriend girlfriend. And they can converse with them. I've seen it happen where, a kid only talked to the trafficker maybe a few hours before it moved to, hey, let's meet in real life, and then they got lured away. Or they will spend time chatting with these individuals and trying to, move to that point where they can meet them in real life, and that happens a lot.
Wow. So as parents, grandparents, what should we be talking to our kids about?
Yeah, so I'm glad you asked. So I wrote my book, Talk to Them. I have my book too. And I wrote it because I travel around and I'm constantly, giving presentations to the community about human trafficking. And I'm expressing to the public, when I first started investigating this crime, the national average age of entry into sex trafficking was 15 years old. Now it's 13 years old. And in my opinion, it's inching closer and closer. We've got some 12, 11-year-old cases going on right now, which means that parents need to have these conversations earlier than you would think, more often than not, and definitely before they have access to any electronic device. For example, I went on a trip a few weeks ago and I was sitting in the airport waiting for my flight, and I saw these two kids. Literally both of them had an iPad. They looked to be 6, 7 years old, and they were on TikTok. And their parents were in their own world on their own phones, completely oblivious to what those kids were doing on TikTok. Now, I don't know if you've been on TikTok lately, but there's at any point where you could swipe and see something inappropriate, and let alone them having access to it with their own profiles where people and strangers could converse with them right on that app. Super dangerous. So if you're going to give your child a device, you should already have had all these conversations or be having these conversations with them about what happens online. Things like, if anyone is trying to get you to go to a different platform that I don't know about, this is why they're doing that. Really explain to them, these are the intentions of bad people, so that they recognize it when it's happening, and also so that they know to come to you, their parent or grandparent or guardian or whoever's taking care of them, to tell you, this person just wrote me a really weird message. Here, look. So they share that with you, because you have to have that open communication where they feel comfortable enough to share things with you. Otherwise, you're not going to know. And that's where the danger happens.
Makes sense.
Mhm.
So, is there any electronic type of things to block your kids from, like where they can only talk to kids, or does it not matter because these people are pretending to be kids?
Also true.
Mm.
They do pretend to be peers. Um, so it's one of those things where, as parents, we no longer can not be educated on this stuff. We have to inform ourselves on these apps. For example, I think it was 2023 or maybe it was 2024. The schools were pushing an app called the Saturn app. And the Saturn app was, for the students to communicate with their teachers and their peers in the class. But I don't think the school checked into the fact that anyone, myself included, and if I was a bad guy, could create a profile, and then I have a whole pool of kids that I could talk to. So parents need to really be informed on all of these apps, even ones that are pushed by the school. Parents need to not depend on the school to do this part, this whole conversation, talking to your kids about the dangers. They don't have time for that. It's also not their job. It's your job as the parent. They have all of their curriculum and their tests and, you know, all the other things, the pressures that teachers have. So don't put it on them. This is your job as a parent or a guardian or a caregiver to inform yourself, stay up on it, and have these conversations with them. Now, as far as devices, there are parental controls you can put on. There are companies that do that. But for example, my own niece, who was 12 years old, my sister, being related to a cop, our dad is a cop, she knows. She put all these parental controls on a phone and thought she had the phone locked down. But my 12-year-old niece, whether it was her savviness or her friend's savviness, figured out a way to bypass those parental controls, created a secret Instagram, and my sister discovered then trying to encourage her to send images of herself to them. And they were sending inappropriate images to her. So parental controls can only go so far. And these kids who have been on devices, you know, since they were born, some of them, they're going to be able to figure that out. I would say if you're going to do that and get them a device, and maybe it's because you get home later than they do and they get home first and you want them to have some phone to contact you. No one has home phones anymore, but some kind of phone just in case of emergency. I would get them a device that doesn't even have the internet on it. And there are two companies that I know of. I'm sure there's more. Two that I'm very familiar with is Bark Technologies and Gab, G-A-B-B, Gab Wireless. And both of those companies have smartwatches and phones where it looks like a smartphone. So they're, you know, the likelihood of them getting bullied because their phone looks different is minimized, but it doesn't have the internet. And that is the only real way to keep them away from all this situation until you're ready to give them a different device. And when you're ready, you will already have had all these conversations to talk to them about sextortion and images, and nothing you post on the internet ever goes away, everything lasts forever, and all of those things.
Yeah, well, I'm glad that we have those options, though, at least.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I remember being a single mom, I gave my kids phones pretty early on. They probably, you know, especially my youngest one, probably had a phone before anyone else in her classroom because I liked to be able to connect with her. Of course, the internet wasn't as good then either.
Yeah.
But, you know, I understand the parents wanting to be able to connect with their child during the day, especially if you work a lot.
Yeah, and that totally makes sense. Just get them a device that doesn't have these. I mean, they don't need the internet at 6 years old. They don't need Facebook or Snapchat or anything like that.
Mhm. What are other signs to look for as far as if you're either online or in person meeting I'll call them just a bad person, one of those
Yeah.
people that want to pick people up.
Well, it's one of those where, you know, obviously if it is where they're exploiting some kind of situation, like if your child and you're already gave them a phone and you already gave them access to social media or a game of some kind, and, you know, they're able to communicate with people, arm them with the information that when they're trying to make you delete messages or keep things a secret from me, that will happen, and that's when you need to come tell me about it, because this and this and this is what their intentions are. And so, you know, letting them know this information in advance so they can recognize it happening is really, really critical. As far as signs specific to sex trafficking, you know, if it's a child that has run away and keeps running away from home, and if they are recovered anywhere near a known area for prostitution, like Phoenix, we have like actual streets where unfortunately there is in your face street prostitutes walking, you know, in front of schools, in front of churches, in front of businesses, in front of homes. It is a little overwhelming and in your face right now, but it is basically a situation where they, I forgot where I was going with that. I was on a path. The signs are there as far as them running away and being recovered. There it is, recovered anywhere near that known area for prostitution. And that should give you a heightened sense of they possibly were engaging in or were about to engage in a sex trafficking situation. Because there's a stat out there that says within the first 48 hours, 1 in 3 kids will be introduced into that lifestyle. when they're out on the streets as a runaway. So that's a super vulnerability, them being out on the streets. As far as sex trafficking, other indicators, I mean, if they show up at home with some quantity of money, that where did this money come from? Or a gift of some kind. We've all been alive long enough to know that nobody gives you anything for free without expecting something in return. And so questions need to be asked. What did you have to do to get this? Who gave this to you? I mean, in a loving way, but those questions, it's very concerning as to someone giving my child gifts that I didn't authorize or ask for. In the prostitution world, there is a thing called branding, if you've ever heard of that. So basically there are traffickers, and there's two purposes for the brand. And what the brand is a tattoo, and they will have their victims tattooed. So if you're in line at the gas station and you have 3 people in front of you and they all have the same tattoo, that would be like a bingo red flag that these individuals might be involved in trafficking, in combination with other things like they're dressed to attract, or, in a known area for prostitution, that gas station's located anywhere near the street prostitution area, plus the tattoos. That's going to be a pretty well assumption that you're on the right path, that they might be involved in trafficking. But the branding has 2 purposes. One, part of the exploitation is to offer this person that you're exploiting a sense of belonging. They can, belong to a family, our family, everyone else is square outside of the family. That's law-abiding citizens. If you've ever heard of that, we're all squares. And, some victims are willingly getting these tattoos to feel that sense of belonging, to be a part of this situation with this person. The second purpose is to really advertise to other traffickers, these ones are mine, I own these ones. And so it is, some tattoos I've seen even on victims' faces. It is out in the open as a full advertisement of who they belong to. And it really is modern day slavery. It's not just a catchphrase. It's really someone owning someone else. And so I would say those are some indicators. I mean, there's a lot of indicators. I actually have a list I've prepared that's a resource on my website, my sex trafficking indicators list.
Wow. So do these traffickers ever exchange their people? In other words, hey, I'll send this person to you and you send this person. Do they ever exchange, or they always just keep the same people with them and just keep traveling and moving around?
That is a great question. Yes. So we've noticed a trend where traffickers used to be more territorial, and they would actually shoot each other over, a territory or, a set of victims. But now we're seeing they're kind of partnering up, and they'll travel together. They'll intermix victims. They will, I have had victims be sold from one trafficker to another. And it isn't where that trafficker is actually paying for that victim. It's where that victim is paying the old trafficker to be sold to the new one. But it is a situation where they are doing counter surveillance for each other when they travel together, and they've evolved. Obviously it's them against law enforcement. So anything that they can do to make their situation better and make more money and not get caught by the police, that they're doing it.
So you, as the law enforcement, I mean, you had this big case. You've been in it for 27 years. What are you looking for? How do you catch these people, and how do you basically rescue the people from it?
Yeah, so I've had the unique opportunity, because I've been doing it for a minute, which is a long time, to see our response to this problem evolve. When I first started, we were pursuing prostitutes. We saw them as the one committing the crime, and we were arresting prostitutes all day long, every day. We'd sprinkle in little operations targeting sex buyers, but we weren't even looking at traffickers. And through the years, we have had incidents where we have seen the exploitation and really honed in on its definition of these people, whether they see themselves as victims or not, they are being exploited. And that's the other dynamic here is we don't have victims saying, hey, Detective Chance, please come talk to me. I have to go look for them. And usually that's a negative contact with a uniform and a police car and possibly handcuffs. And so really getting victims to come forward is really hard because of what we were doing before, because their traffickers are telling them the cops are just going to arrest you. And that's definitely what we were doing before. So we're trying to repair relationships with victims and really conduct ourselves in a way where we're actually asking the question we were never asking before, which is, what can I do to help you get out of this situation? And cops, we are here to protect and serve, but typically we're not asking, hey, you just committed a crime, but hey, I just want to get you out of this situation and give you help. And we were not doing that before. So now that we're doing that, we are coming across more and more victims coming forward and disclosing things that have happened to them. As far as finding those victims that don't see themselves as victims, we do still run operations where we'll have male undercovers posing as sex buyers so that we can conduct, undercover operations to get them in a room with us, whether it's under the ruse of you're here for a date or not. And then we will ask them, hey, this is actually, we're not doing a date. We're the police and we're not here to arrest you, but we do want to get you out of this situation so you don't have this happening to you anymore. And sometimes they take us up on the offer and sometimes they go back to their trafficker, which is also mind-blowing to most people. But it is that cycle of violence that they have and that, brainwashing that's really going on where they feel like they're in love with this trafficker. So it does take a certain couple of times of that contact with law enforcement where they really see, okay, I got beat up and that's the last time I'm going to get beat up by this man. I am going to go with this, law enforcement officer and get out. And, we're patient and we'll wait and we'll try and help you when we can.
Okay. So is it illegal to buy sex?
Yes. So prostitution in most states is illegal. And in fact, people have the belief that Nevada is, one of those states where it's not, but it's only one county in Nevada. It's not all of Nevada. In fact, that's why those people, when you're on the Las Vegas Strip there, they're trying to get you to go somewhere. They're advertising this other place, but you've got to leave that county to go to the county where, the bunny ranch is or whatever. And so it is not legal in all of Nevada.
Okay, so not even in Las Vegas. It's a different
Well,
county.
Las Vegas in it's a certain county, so it isn't all of, I think, what is that county? McCarran County, something like that. I don't believe that's the county where it's legal.
Wow. So it is illegal. It's illegal to prostitute and it's illegal to buy prostitution, basically.
Both. Yes.
So you can get arrested for both of those. And of course, if you're a trafficker, that's a crime. So you
Yes.
get arrested for that. So do you
Yes.
ever have operations where you go in and you're just arresting everybody? You just walk into a place and like everybody's under arrest?
Well, I definitely pursue traffickers in a different way now. Like I said, when I think I alluded to that we catfish traffickers, I have 7 Facebooks, 4 Instagrams, Tag, Meet Me, Bumble, Plenty of Fish, Snapchat, Twitter. I just opened up, or X, I just opened up a Discord, all in undercover personas. This is on top of my business social media. Where I am engaging in conversations with potential traffickers, trying to recruit and groom me instead of a live victim. And that is happening almost daily. And it isn't just local. Like I've extradited a trafficker from Orlando, Florida, all the way to Arizona to see a judge for a class 5 felony. And the trafficker's never seen my face in an undercover operation. So it's definitely very meaningful for me to pursue these guys as often as I can in an undercover capacity so that we don't have to, have victims come forward and we could still get them. That's the idea.
Exactly. So you just would use like fake profiles of pictures of someone they would want to.
You never know who you're talking to.
From both
goes both
sides,
ways,
right?
doesn't it?
Oh, it's only fair, right?
Yes, that's right.
Only fair. And what resources are there for parents, grandparents?
Yeah, so each state is actually getting more and more involved in the fight against human trafficking. So I've noticed as I've traveled around presenting all over the United States that there are organizations being developed, 501(c)(3)s and things. Whether those organizations are there to help law enforcement, you know, find people, interact with bad guys, child predators and such, or it is where they really the need is to have more facilities for when we get these victims rescued to give them a stable place to stay because they have nothing. Like they're leaving that situation and the only property they have is what's in the hotel room. And that's like their prized possession because that's all their traffickers will let them own. They have nothing else. And so being able to provide them a place to stay, opportunities to get jobs, help them build a resume, get their ID back, you know, a nice clean place to stay that's stable. That is all what we really need. And that is not just for women, not just for kids, but for other demographics. I didn't really answer your question before, but yes, we do have male victims. We have, you know, kids in transition that are victims. And we really don't have placements as much for male victims or transitional kids because we have focused on, you know, the larger demographic that comes forward, and that is what we know about. We do know the other demographics exist. They just don't come forward as much as females do, whether adult or juvenile. And so we're really lacking everywhere, in my opinion, on placement and rehabilitation. There are organizations also that help with the branding tattoos. Like here in Arizona, Soul Survivor Inc. is a nonprofit where they will either, you know, do the laser treatment to get that brand taken off of that victim, or they'll tattoo over that tattoo. Because really that's a reminder of the situation they were in, that they have to look at every day. So that's super important as part of their recovery.
Got it. So this housing that you have for them, is it sometimes houses where, everyone has their own bedroom or something like that, like a large house? Or how do they actually house these people, and where do the funds come for it?
Yeah, so the large organization in the Phoenix metropolitan area, and I think they might have other facilities in other states, is the Dream Center. And the Dream Center is actually an old hotel, which is kind of ironic because a lot of their exploitation occurred in hotels. So they have taken this hotel and tried to really renovate it and make it like each room is a little apartment with a kitchenette and, you know, one bedroom and, you know, a little living area. And so it's really part of that rehabilitation is to give them their own little space.
Mm.
But all that costs money. And so they do a lot of fundraising. They are a 501(c)(3). They are supported by some religious organizations, but they definitely are always taking donations. And that's for adult females. They are also affiliated with one of our 3 juvenile placements, Streetlight. And that's, you know, kind of like if you've ever heard of Children of the Night in California. It's going to be a shelter for children, anyone under the age of 18. And what is important about these shelters, and if anyone was considering trying to go that route and help this issue and make, you know, an opportunity for a shelter for victims, is that it is specific to just this kind of victim. The reason I say that is because when we were investigating before, and this is another way we've evolved, we used to, if the kid was in child welfare, I would, you know, do my interview. I got to go bust down doors and get the bad guy. Here you go, Child Protective Services. Here's this kid. They would call random group home and, you know, whoever has an available bed wherever and take that kid there. And what we were noticing is these kids would go into that group home, which is a sterile environment. You have kids that are there. They've never heard that you can make $80 in 15 minutes for giving someone oral sex before. So you've invested that sterile group home with, you know, that idea, unfortunately. And this kid, taught by their trafficker, will recruit other victims, other kids out of that placement. And so we have this revolving door of, you know, that kid goes there, they friend another kid, convinced them to run away with them. They introduced them to their trafficker, and now we have 2 kids out there. So to stop all of that, we have come up with the protocol. And the protocol is basically a multiple disciplinary team of law enforcement, Department of Child Safety or CPS, Mercy Maricopa here in Arizona, that's the insurance company that pays the bill for kids in the child welfare system, a behavioral health hospital initially. Now it's called, it's something else. It's a different placement facility, but it's a lockdown place. And so what happens now is I do my interview. I am the transport now, so the kids can't jump out of my car. Law enforcement transports them safely to the placement. Then DCS almost signs like a temporary custody of this kid for 23 hours to that facility. So they stay at the facility for 23 hours. 23 hours later, we come back in, no matter if it's 2 in the morning or whatever, we are safely transporting them to their final placement. And so since we've been doing that, and I joke when I talk about this, but we kidnap these kids for 23 hours. And it's actually working really well because they're going to a placement that's specific for sex trafficking victims. Their traffickers freak out because they're missing for 23 hours and they just dip, like they are gone. So even if that kid does run away from placement, they have a hard time finding their trafficker again. So they just stay where they're at.
Mhm.
And it's really been working much better than what we had before. It's not totally perfect, but it is a plan and it is working. And so, thinking through all of that, we had to learn trial by error, but I'm glad we did.
So once these kids are actually in their final placements, what kind of treatment or counseling, how do you help them? Because people get comfortable doing what they're doing, even if it's something that they don't feel good about.
Yeah, it's where those placements, like I said, specific to those type of kids that have been through that traumatic event, get resources. And survivor victim advocates actually are one of the main resources, especially if it's a kid that, I might do my initial interview with them and they tell me some truths, but not all the truth. I had a case once where it took 5 months for this kid to finally talk to me. She was sitting in placement and the survivor victim advocate worked with her for 5 months, being relatable because she had been through it. She's a survivor and now an advocate. And finally, 5 months later, she was able to disclose, and I started my case and my whole investigation 5 months late. But that's okay because I was able to successfully charge this trafficker with 11 counts. And he was, he went to trial and she did testify against him on her 18th birthday. And he was found guilty and he was sentenced to 108 years in prison. So it can be done. It's not the best ideal situation, but it can be done. And it's a matter of, working to get that corroborative evidence. And also we went after him financially for money laundering and illegal enterprise, which is what we're doing now. Instead of basing all of our cases just on a victim, we're going after them for other felonies. And that's really getting them where it hurts, taking all their stuff. That's the fun part.
Yeah.
Mm.
That is the fun part. When you
Yeah.
say that, it's like, well, good.
I'm
Good.
seizing your Maserati. I'm seizing your bank account. Yeah.
Exactly. And then I don't know if you follow them after that, but have you ever followed some of your kids as they went into adulthood, and how are they doing now? What are they doing now?
Yeah, so I don't have a lot of happy endings with that. Unfortunately, that kid that testified on her 18th birthday, we legally helped her change her name. She was transitioning from Child Protective Services into independent living, which is where the state will still support her as a young adult, getting her an apartment, a job. She had a full ride scholarship to Arizona State University. She threw all of that away and returned to prostitution. And unfortunately, I've had contact with her 2 or 3 times now. And, it's one of those where she got out. We had her safe and she made the choice to go back in. And that whole demographic is a multitude of reasons, but definitely we did not rehabilitate her, I guess, in a way that would make her make a different choice. I do have some victims that I have had contact with, like that big case that I didn't really go into detail here, but it was, it involved that Department of Corrections officer and that nurse's daughter. And it was actually a case of familial trafficking. It was 7 victims, 2 juveniles, and it was an uncle who was trafficking his 13-year-old niece and the 17-year-old stepdaughter, and then the adult females. And that case took 5 years to go to court, which was a task in itself, us keeping those 7 victims, still wanting to press charges 5 years later, and then show up to court many, many times for it to get continued till ultimately we went to trial. But we did it, and he was charged with 100 and I think the jury deliberated on 105 counts, and he was found guilty on 101, and the judge sentenced him to 493.5 years in prison. And so that's a victory that's like a record in the United States. And, you know, what I aim for every time I do these investigations, because I know it's possible. And when I teach on this to law enforcement as well. But that victim, that main victim, was in her 20s when she testified. And I spent 7 months with her. And I have, you know, I've been Facebook friends with her for years now after this. And truly, she doesn't have a job. She does not drive. She luckily, you know, got married and has kids and has a family. It's just, she could have, you know, had a different life had all this not happened to her. So it for sure affected her, but she didn't return to prostitution to my knowledge, and she's doing much better in that way.
Wow. I just learned a lot of things I had no idea about. So thanks for sharing that and just, bringing up the awareness, because we need to know and be aware of those things. And also, I think just as a community, if we see those things happening, we're so keen to protect our own family, our own kids, but my goodness, if you see it happening to someone else, say something,
Yeah.
at least say something to someone who can do something.
Yeah, that's one of the heartbreaking things for me as a detective. I've had several victims talk about being assaulted in broad daylight, people around, people are breaking out their phones, but not to call the police. They're recording it for TikTok. And that's just devastating that these victims see you doing that and you could have helped them.
Exactly. Yes. So, is there anything else we need to know about this that would help us be more aware or be more active as far as community?
Yeah. So if you wanted to get involved in the fight, I talk about this, but a lot of people watch Instagram stories or TikTok reels, and they see all these people confronting child predators and doing their own little undercover operations. And all of that is really hurting us because it's making it harder for me as an undercover in official capacity that can actually arrest somebody to actually make the arrest and get these people. It's also dangerous. Like we've had several instances where people on TikTok trying to do that to be Instagram, TikTok famous get murdered over it because those are predators, and they're also dangerous people. If they're willing to hurt a child, they're definitely willing to hurt you. And it's just not leading to anything. It's not leading to successful prosecution. You're not involving law enforcement until after the fact. I can't do anything with this. I can't go to court with this. There's no evidence, that I could get that hasn't been tainted by the way that it was obtained. I mean, we have certain rules we have to abide by. I can't just go into an emergency room, put on a white coat, and perform surgery because I don't think you're doing a good enough job. It's kind of a slap in law enforcement's face, really. It's actually impersonating a police officer, also committing a crime. So what we can do, though, as a community is get involved with these organizations that are trying to, rehabilitate survivors that get out, doing drives like clothing drives and things, because like I said, their property, that their life's possession is back at that hotel room. And here I am trying to tell them to leave that. And like, it's like nothing compared to, what we hold true to ourselves as far as material things. It's like makeup and, hair tools, and that's what they left at the apartment or the hotel. And if we could give them their own property when we rescue them, if you as a community do a drive and you create backpacks of like different size clothing that we can hand them a backpack, with flip-flops and a hoodie and leggings and underwear, hairbrush, toothbrush, toothpaste, deodorant, basic stuff, then they can have something of their own. And that really goes a long way to, the first part of their rehabilitation is to see that they can have something other than what's provided to them by their trafficker. But get involved with volunteering at these organizations. There's legislation and bills that each state is, bringing forth to try and make it more stricter, not only for sex buyers who are really causing this whole problem, but also stricter punishments for traffickers, especially in Arizona. We're going to introduce a bill that if you traffic a child, you get a life sentence, no matter what, period. Well, I don't know if it'll pass. I know there has been some states that have passed that, but paying attention to and using your rights as a citizen to vote for the right thing is really going to help this problem and help the fight. So that's what my suggestion would be, to get involved. As far as staying informed, I didn't mention this before, but both those Bark Technologies and Gab Wireless, they have blogs on their website. So if you want to stay on the up and up with all these apps popping up, they actually have articles each month that they rate the danger level of some of these apps. And so you can inform yourself. Like if your kid comes to you and says, hey, can I download this app, this Roblox app? You can look it up on the blog and see how dangerous it is, and make your decisions based off of you being informed on what that app is, and if it has private messaging, or if it has to work with location services on, or those kind of things. I have a class that I created on my own website. I call it the power of awareness, because I've literally seen this, with that sentence, the 500-year sentence, that wasn't happening several years ago. And this is only happening because people are becoming more and more aware. And I have informed juries that can wrap their head around me testifying that this person was freely walking down the side of the road with a phone in their hand, but they're not free to leave. That is a class available on my website. And then obviously I have my book that I wrote to inform parents on, these conversations that need to be happening. Because for me, I'm tired. I'm tired of it being too late. The thing has already happened by the time I meet this child, and I'd rather never meet the child that way at all. And the only way to prevent that is if there's other people who are responsible for these kids taking that step to inform them and protect them.
Beautiful. And what's the new name of your website again?
achancephorawareness.com.
Okay. Okay, great.
Yeah.
Thank you. So now I have a personal question for you.
Yeah.
What gives you the most happiness and fulfillment in your life at this point?
Well, I'm really, really happy because of the victories I've had with these, 100+ year cases, that teaching, inspiring both the community to get involved, people to understand what this problem is, open their eyes to it, and then law enforcement, because these are really hard cases to work. I joke when I talk about this that a homicide detective, their victim is dead right there. They're not going anywhere. My victim might go back to prostitution, might just change their mind on wanting to press charges, might get heavily involved in drugs, might go rob a place. My victims are a handful, and keeping them, safe and not getting in trouble while we play this game of 1, 2, 3, 5 years before we go to trial on something, or something gets resolved, unfortunately, it's really, really hard. And so having officers, detectives, investigators really want to play that game and, do the best job they can is what I am trying to inspire law enforcement to do when I do my law enforcement coaching and training. Because a lot of times it's very intimidating, and they just don't know how to do these investigations to get to that level of 100+ years. And, I want to impart my wisdom on them and how possible it is, because we need traffickers to be afraid of us.
That's right.
Mhm.
That is so right. Well,
Yeah.
thank you so much for being on the podcast today and for all your education about this subject.
Yeah, absolutely. And if your viewers want to follow me, I'm on Instagram also. I didn't even mention that. It's A_Chance_for_awareness. And I'm really active on Instagram, putting out more information about these apps, commenting on, some arrests that happen and overall awareness about what's going on every day.
Okay, thank you. So I have one last question before we finish. What is your best advice on living an incredible, amazing life?
Um, I would say don't be afraid. Um, I've got traffickers that have threatened my life and, that have sent letters and all kinds of things, but I'm not going to be afraid. I'm not going to live in fear. So, take steps to protect yourself, head on a swivel, good situational awareness, but don't live afraid. I think that's really important.
I
That's not
love
any way to live.
Well, thank you so
Yeah.
much, Heidi.
Thank you.
Yeah, we'll talk to you again soon.
All right.